Very important. You know what mind games are?
Yes.
In Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yes.
What are they?
Or you play tricks on your opponent so they misplay?
My name is AkemiTCG, and today I will teach you about mind games in Yu-Gi-Oh! I understand there's not too many people talking about this, so pretty much to dumb it down is Yu-Gi-Oh! In itself is a game of chess. You're playing one card, and you're playing these cards, you're trying to beat your opponent out, make sure you have more cards than your opponent, and then attack them for a game. But you have to understand, sometimes it's not about the cards you draw, sometimes it's not just about the plays you make, sometimes it's not just about when you activate your cards. You have to understand there's another layer of this game, and it's called mind gaming. What is it? Let's jump into it. So the first lesson I want to talk to you guys about is the aura. Now think about this. Have you ever faced a duelist that's just very quiet? He's very solemn, he's just doing his own thing. And you just feel mildly intimidated by him, so you feel more threatened by what plays he's gonna make. This is aura. So now I'm going to give you two examples. One example is going to be a duelist with an okay amount of aura, and one example is going to be a duelist with a very aggressive, strong amount of aura, so to speak. Alright, here's an example of a duelist that doesn't really quite have the aura going.
Normal summon Parlor Dragon maybe?
Are you using the effect?
Yeah.
What does it do?
You can send one dragon.
So here's an example of someone with slightly better aura. Not perfect, but better. Activate effect of Parlor. Response?
No.
Send to graveyard. Angel. So what's really important here? How do you get that aura? It's actually very simple. You just have to know your deck inside out really well, so you know exactly what plays you're gonna make. Because if you're confused about the plays you're gonna make, you don't know how you're gonna make the next play for your deck, it's gonna be quite hard for you to function normally, especially in like a competitive duel, in a competitive setting. And what also helps is knowing what deck your opponent's playing and how to counteract it. If you're just very calm about everything, then internally you'll feel fine, and also externally your opponent will see that you're not messing around. If you're liking this video, make sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe, and if you're learning something so far, then make sure you do the same as well. Number 2, the no response game. As a heads up, if you haven't figured it out, these mind games only work when you're doing it physically in the person, or if you're playing in a remote duel setting, that's completely fine. But online, you can't really play these mind games, just a heads up. So anyways, no response. So usually, let's say you're playing against a combo deck, and your opponent is playing a plethora of cards, like a ton of cards. And ideally, you want to hand trap your opponent's deck. You want to drop the Gamma, you want to drop the Ash, you want to drop the Imperm. But if you do this, we just flat out put your hand down and say you have no response to your opponent, you lose all power that you may have against your opponent. Let's say like if your opponent summons Needle Fiber, right? And think about which response is better. They summon Needle Fiber and you're like, oh, I have no response. Now they can just go on with their play and do whatever they want, and they're not afraid of anything. But as long as they're like Needle Fiber effect, and you can look at your hand like this and you're like, Imperm, Phantasme, you have a response to it, you have more leverage against your opponent instead of saying, oh, I just have no hand traps. You lose all leverage. Next is Niburu Counting. If you're playing against combo decks, I know a lot of decks nowadays, they main deck Niburu. And what Niburu Counting is when your opponent has summoned 5 monsters successfully, then you may activate Niburu and drop a giant rock that just annihilates the whole field. So what is Niburu Counting? Your opponent summons a monster, say 1. Your opponent summons another monster, 2. Then 3, 4, 5. By vocalizing it and saying it out loud, you can possibly mess up your opponent really bad. And keep note that this only really works maybe games 2 and 3. And sometimes people set Nibiru in. But if you want to maximize effectiveness of Niburu Counting, first you actually count 1 through 5, then you actually have Nibiru in your hand and Nibiru them. And then the second time and the third time, you've conditioned your opponent, so your opponent believes that you have Nibiru in hand every time you're counting. And if you do that, trust me, your opponent is going to be more terrified of Niburu, especially if you already Nibiru'd them once. Extra bonus tip for this version or this episode of Mind Games: smoke screen siding. So when you're siding in games 2 and 3 in a match, what some people usually do is they're like, oh, I need I'll put in this card, this card, this card against the deck, and then this card, this card, this card. They're siding in 6 cards. By siding in those 6 cards, you're potentially giving your opponent some information about potentially what card you are siding in. There could be any information, especially if you don't side in any cards at all. So what people do to mind game your opponent is a thing called smoke screen siding, where you take your 15 cards, all of them, slap them with your main deck and shuffle them, and then take out 15 cards that you don't want. So that way your opponent has no idea what cards you sided and no idea how many cards you sided, and you give them as little information as possible. And also, a viewer has told me this, the Spiral guys told me, where if you're new to the Yu-Gi-Oh scene, if you're new to the tournament scene and you're going to a tournament, you do not tell your opponent you're going first or second until after you finish siding. Because if you tell your opponent, oh, I'm going second, your opponent can now side all their cards going first. Get them with that surprise factor. Siding cards for going second when you're going first deck, and then call going second to see how your opponent reacts. Because sometimes they're going to be caught really off guard because of that. And that is it for this episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Mind Games. If there's any kind of mind game or kind of topic you guys want me to talk about, please let me know down in the comments below. And also, if this is helpful, please drop that thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. I am AkemiTCG. I will see you guys in the next one. Alright, bye guys.
The world ends now.